had no idea that we were in the process of getting a new nutrition facts label. I thought we were just doing the same old thing that we've been doing for years. But apparently, we're getting a new one, and I'll try to explain the differences and talk a little bit about the label in general. It's funny how I always learn something when I'm getting ready for my class. So I was telling this gentleman that I really learned a lot this time, and it's really exciting to me to do that. And I've heard from a lot of people, that even people that aren't coming to class today, that they're really intrigued by the label. So hopefully we can understand a little bit more, and then we can spread the word. You all have seen the nutrition facts label, whether you know it or not. It's this thing that's on the back of every package or the side of every bottle. It's on everything that we get from the grocery stores. But remember, it's not a prescription. It's not something to help you manage a disease. It's help you make wise choices, okay? The priorities for dietary guidance have changed, and because the focus is shifting to calories and serving sizes as two important factors in making healthy choices. So we're shifting more to the calories, and you'll see that in a minute, where you can tell more about calories with the new label. There are these guidelines called the Dietary Guidelines for Americans, and they focus on variety, nutrient density, and amount. What have I said before in my classes? Variety, moderation, and what else? Portion. So how much, how often, those things. And so that's what the Dietary Guidelines of Americans focus on. Those guidelines also tell us to consume less salt and less sugar, or less added sugar. And we'll talk about added sugar in a minute. It tells us to shift toward healthier food and beverage choices, to eat more whole grains. We talk about this often, don't we? To choose low-fat dairy products. And so this label is a tool that we can use to help meet those guidelines. So we have those guidelines out there, and now we have a better label to help us meet those guidelines. The goal is to focus attention on information important for addressing public health problems. So we want to look at public health problems like what? What are some public health problems that we have? Diabetes, obesity, heart disease. So those are the things that we think of most often. So it helps us make better food choices by following the food labels. We're not trying to tell people what they can eat or can't eat. It's just that these labels want to make sure that you know what you're eating, so you have an informed decision to make. So, to understand a food label and make better choices for health, you have to understand a few things. First, we'll talk about calories. So look at the serving size, the number of servings, and the calories per serving. So let's look at this particular label. It says that the serving size, and I don't know what this is, but the serving size is 2/3 of a cup, or 55 grams if you were to weigh it, okay? How many servings are in this container? See right up there, it says 8 servings per container. And then it shows us how many calories in a serving, in one serving. So that's the first thing we need to look at. Do you see anything unusual about the word calories and the 230? Have you ever looked at the label? Can you tell me what might look different? Sammy?
It's bolder.
It's bolder. So that's one of the changes they made, is they put more emphasis on the calories by bolding calories and the number. So that's one of the big changes. And I'm going to show you some differences in a little while, but I think it's kind of interesting what's happening right now. We also check for heart health, so choose foods that are lower in fat, saturated fat, and sodium, and keep trans fats to 0. So if we look at this, this label, we can see that there are 8 grams of fat, and 1 gram is saturated fat. What do we want to do with saturated fat? We want to limit it, right? That's one of the things that we want to limit in our diet for heart health. And does anyone remember what a saturated fat is? Not chemically, I don't want the chemical composition, but what is different about a saturated fat?
When it's cold, it solidifies.
Yeah, when it's cold, it solidifies. So, and at room temperature, really, it's solid. So let's think about things that are saturated. Lard, shortening. You know, we don't cook much with Crisco anymore. Most of us don't anyway, but that is a saturated fat. Butter, even if you leave butter at room temperature, it stays in its same shape, so it's a saturated fat. The fat on beef, you know, that really hard fat on the outside of a steak, that's saturated. So for this particular label, we have 1 gram of saturated fat and 0 grams of trans fat. So, and trans fats, they're complicated, but they're sort of created through processes. So that's, they're not healthy for us, so we want to limit those. Okay, so this, from a fat perspective, yeah?
What's an example of a trans fat?
Margarine, like margarine in the store, it has trans fats in it. They're getting away from that, they're coming up with better ways to make it, but that's one of the typical things.
Has the plastic in it?
Well, I don't know, but it is chemically produced, so. So how about fat in this label? Sounds pretty good, doesn't it? Sounds like a pretty good food that way. And then we look at, is this food nutritionally valuable? So we want to select foods that are nutrient dense and have a good source of fiber, and consider how added sugars fit into your daily budget of sugars. So let's look at this. This has 10 grams of added sugars. Well, the carbohydrates are also the sugar. So, you know, remember, carbohydrates are broken down into sugar when they're digested. So this has 37 grams of carbohydrates. 4 of those are dietary fiber, and 12 of them are total sugars. And that includes 10 added sugars. So what do you think? That's quite a bit of added sugar, isn't it, for that product? So maybe we would want to look at that and not have it in our diet. And what about 4 grams of fiber? It's okay, but it's probably not the best source of fiber. So that's just looking at a generic label. We don't know what that food is. Remember those dietary guidelines and that are for the Americans, and we want to do balance, variety, moderation, all those things? Well, these are on the label by following a healthy eating pattern across the lifespan, focus on variety, nutrient density, and the amount, limit the intake of added sugars and saturated fats, reduce sodium, so all these things are seen on that label, shift to a healthier food and beverage choices, and support healthy eating for all. I didn't do the slide. Okay, so let's talk more about serving sizes. This new label, if you think back to the slide a while ago that had the label on it, clearly focuses on serving size. It showed it very clearly, didn't it? It has the serving size and the calories in bold print so that you really can focus in on that. It has updated serving sizes needed to reflect what people really consume. So one of the things that I want to show you right now is these Cheerios. Cheerios are a good food, right? Yes? Really great food. They're high in fiber. They are a whole grain. Remember, whole grains are good for us. And Cheerios are just about as good for us as oatmeal. So I'm okay if you just want to eat Cheerios. You don't have to eat oatmeal because they are really a good, heart-healthy cereal. What I'm going to demonstrate is that this box on the side has Can you tell from there if this is an old or a new label?
Old.
This is an old label, isn't it? This label is old because we can't see the calories very boldly, can we? So, but the label says that a serving size is 3/4 of a cup, and that there's about 11 servings in this box. Well, let's see what that looks like. This is one of the things that the FDA came up against, is to see, what do people really eat? What are they eating out there? Is it 3/4 of a cup of Cheerios?
How do they decide?
Hmm?
I can't imagine how they would decide.
Well, trial and error, lots of, this is 1/4 of a cup, a 1/2 a cup, and 3/4 of a cup. Now, what do you think?
Maybe a child.
Maybe a little one, yeah. But who amongst us is going to stop there? So tell me when to stop. So this is what the FDA did. If they did experiments like this, and they said, you know, what do people really eat? What are they really eating out there? They're not eating 3/4 of a cup of Cheerios. No, it's not going to get it. So there can't be 11 servings in here, can there? And so this bowl full of cereal isn't 110 calories, is it? No, it's a lot more because it's full, okay? It's probably a 1.5 cups rather than 3/4 of a cup. Now, in some ways we can say, well, that's okay because we're getting more fiber that way. And that's true, you know, but you also have to take into account the calories. And this is just one example of, you know, the difference in the serving sizes. Okay. Cheerios also have the information for children under the age of 4, or children ages 4 to 12 and under the age of 4. So that is on here, but that's an old label. Remember, these are the old labels. So, Sandy.
Deborah, what's the difference in calories between the honey nut and the regular?
Oh, curiosity. Okay. So interesting. Oh, thank you, Sammy. This is another teaching point. Appreciate it. Oops. Sorry for your ears. The plain Cheerios, it's a cup is the serving size. This was 3/4 of a cup. This has 100 calories, and this has 110. Part of the reason for making this 3/4 of a cup serving to keep the calories similar. Do you see how manufacturers do those things? And that's why the FDA has to have a lot of regulations. So, Sammy, this you get a whole cup for 100 calories. This you get 3/4 of a cup for 110.
Is it the serving size, or is it the fact that that one has honey in it?
No,
And
it's-
sugar.
Well, that's what makes it more calories. That's what makes it more calories. But remember, there's more calories in the 3/4 of a cup than there are in the
cup.
in the just cup. Yeah. So does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. All right. Let's go back to the PowerPoint. So it's really important that when you look at a label, that you look at that serving size and determine, is that really what I'm going to eat? Okay. So what is considered a single serving has changed over the years. One of the things that I just always like to bring up is soda. Unfortunately, I could not find an old label on a soda. But the old labels said that the serving size is 8 ounces. Okay? This is 20 ounces. I don't know about you, but I would drink the whole bottle if I got a soda. I don't drink much soda, but if I bought this, it would be the bottle. It wouldn't be 8 ounces. So if it said 8 ounces, I'd have to multiply the calories, considering this is 20 ounces. But now this label, so this is one of the things that the FDA looked at, is we're going to drink a whole bottle, aren't we? And so we have to call this a whole bottle, is a serving, okay? So on this it says, serving size, 1 bottle. So it reflects exactly how many calories you're getting if you drink this whole thing. That's one of the examples that I've always brought up is really, are you gonna stop at 8 ounces?
I don't drink soda, I'm curious, how many calories?
240.
That's not as bad as I expected.
No. Yeah, soda doesn't have as many calories as we think. It's just that it's all sugar, you know. So it's not, it doesn't have anything else for it, you know. Okay, so there it says, law requires serving sizes be based on the amounts people actually eat, not what we should eat. Another example is that bagel. At one point, the bagel packages said a half a bagel for a serving size. Well, really? I'm gonna eat just a half bagel? The whole bagel is mine. And so a bagel should be the serving size, not a half. And I have a package of bagels in my office, and I looked at it before I came over here, and it is one bagel, not a half anymore. And if you get a bag of the little miniature bagels, it's one bagel is the serving size for that particular bagel. So it doesn't, just because it's smaller, they're not gonna say, okay, you have to eat 2 to have a serving. It's still just one bagel. Does that make sense? Okay. So the labels, the serving sizes are calculated based on this RACCS, which means reference amounts customarily consumed. So that's what the FDA decided. They did all of these experiments and tests and studies, and it's based on reference amounts customarily consumed, okay? So there's 30 out of 158 of those that'll change, and some of those examples are bulk ice cream. So it went from a half a cup to 2/3 of a cup. Because really, even if you use a half a cup scoop to scoop out your ice cream, when you get it scooped out, it's rounded up, isn't it? So it's really closer to 2/3 of a cup, even though you're using a half a cup scoop. So that's why they determined it would be that. The carbonated beverages like the Coke went from 8 ounces to 12 ounces is the customarily consumed. But this Coca-Cola went beyond that. They could have put, by law, they could have put 12 ounces on that bottle, but they didn't. They put the bottle, so they're going beyond that. Yogurt from 8 ounces to 6 ounces, and that's because, you know, a lot of the manufacturers put, even though it looks like maybe an 8 ounce serving, it's really only 6 ounce. Those little cartons are not very big, but some of them are going now to being a whole 8 ounces. So that's why they did all this, is what are really people eating out there? So this just shows, this is an example of the ice cream. So a pint, current sizes is a half a cup, and then we're going to the new serving size, which is 2/3 of a cup. And so we go from 4 servings per container to 3, and then you can see the calorie differences. So it's more real, isn't it? It's more what we do. For packages between 1 and 2 servings, information has to be declared for the entire package rather than for a serving. So that's your soda example. If it's 12 ounces or if it's 20 ounces. And why is that? It's because people usually consume the whole package at one sitting, don't they? So just back to that example of the Coke. And then there's this other thing called multi-serving packages. And there are dual columns of labeling required for some packages that can be consumed in one sitting or in multiple sittings. And for packages that contain 200 to 300 of a standard serving size, and they're required per serving and per package per unit labeling. So what that means is, if something you can consume in 1 or 2 servings, if you have that, then it has to show both of the calories for 1 serving or for the whole package. I tried to find an example of this and I could not find it. But I do have a little example that I'll talk more about later. But I bought these 2 packages of soup, okay? This one says that the serving size is the container. Same brand says that it's a cup, serving size is a cup, and there are about 2 servings per container. Here's the difference. What's the difference?
New versus old label.
One of them has the new labeling on it, right here. This one has the old labeling on it. The one with the old labeling says 2 servings in here. Well, really? Are you gonna have this in 2 servings? Probably not. You're gonna eat this whole carton. So, if we could kind of combine these, this is where they might have a dual label. So you might have a label here that is for the whole package, and one right next to it that reflects what's in, if you had half the package, or if you had two servings in it. So let's say that Rita and I are gonna have our tomato basil soup and grilled cheese sandwich, and we decide that since we're having a grilled cheese sandwich with this soup, we can just have half a box each, because we don't need as much as if we're having just soup and crackers. So that would be an example of the dual labeling, but unfortunately I couldn't find a real live example. And can you see that this is in process right now? This is going on today. So it might be that next week, if I went back and bought this soup, this company would have already put on the new label for this soup. So it's exciting. It was fun to shop. And so when you go to the grocery store, pay attention to the labels. Look at those labels and read them and see if you can figure things out, because it's really interesting. Or maybe it's just me. I think it's interesting. Okay, so the new label also has updated nutrition science. So they're looking at added sugar. So that's something that's new on the label. We never had added sugar before. It was just total carbohydrates, and then carbohydrates that were from fiber or sugar. Okay, so not added sugar. And I'll give you some examples in a minute. Also, there's a list of nutrients. The new label talks more about fat and saturated and trans fats, the daily values for certain nutrients, especially sodium, dietary fiber, and vitamin D. So let's talk about those added sugars. There is scientific evidence that supports reducing calorie intake from added sugar is beneficial. So a high intake of added sugar decreases the intake of nutrient-dense foods. So let's talk about that. What does that mean exactly? If we are eating things that are high in added sugar, things like that soda, that Coke down there, what we're doing is we're filling up on things that are just sugar, that aren't nutrient dense. And so we're not hungry for those things. Our appetite is satisfied. So we don't eat the things that are nutritious for us. We don't eat the fruit and the vegetables because we've had that Coke and it's filled me up. So that's the first point. Diets lower in sugar-sweetened foods and beverages are associated with lower risk of heart disease. So there is evidence out there that when you reduce your sugar intake, added sugar intake, and that we're talking about white sugar, that kind of sugar. When you reduce that intake, you're reducing your risk for heart disease. And there's evidence out there that no more than 10% of our total daily calories should come from added sugar. So it's hard to meet nutrient needs and stay within calorie limits if you exceed that. So it's really important these days. And I think that we're paying more attention to it. Why? Because there's more of it out there. We are seeing more and more sodas. My goodness. You know, I used to go to the soda aisle, and what did we have? We had Coke and Pepsi and 7-Up, and now we have, you know, when you talk about Coke, it's vanilla Coke, and it's cherry Coke, and it's, I don't know what else, but there's so many varieties. and so much of it out there, and they advertise so well that people are eating more and more of it. Well, the FDA wants to help us make better choices, and that's what this labeling's about. So what are the added sugars? It's sugars that are like white sugar, sugars from syrups and honey, sugars from concentrated fruit or vegetable juices that are in excess of what would be expected from the same amount of 100% fruit or vegetable juice of the same type. So when they're concentrated, the water's taken out of it, and there's just the sugar from the fruit sugar and the carbohydrates. So that's what this means, is when it's a concentrated sugar from a fruit or vegetable juice, it can be called an added sugar. So for example, if you were to have a cup of Greek yogurt, plain Greek yogurt, and then you added a tablespoon of frozen orange juice concentrate to sweeten it, that would be an added sugar, because that's a concentrated sugar. It's a fruit sugar, but it's concentrated, and it has as many calories in it as a whole cup of juice would have. So does that make sense? Okay. So when we're talking about the package saying, what's in it, added sugar excludes fruits or vegetable juice that it concentrated from 100% fruit juice that is sold to consumers. So that is the juice that has been reconcentrated, reconstituted. Thank you. So that's what this means. And then it also excludes some sugars found in fruit and vegetable juices, jellies, jams, preserves, and fruit spreads. A while ago, remember I told you about pages and pages on the FDA website? If you were to look there, you could probably find exactly what they mean by that last little statement. What it says in some sugars found in fruits, and well, it would tell you which ones. So that's what they did, lots of research. Sammy?
So, if I'm buying plain vanilla yogurt and putting honey in it, then I might as well buy one that's got sugar in it because I'm doing the same thing, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
you are. Yeah, if you're adding any kind of sweetener to it, you're adding the same thing, sugar. But some people would rather have honey than sugar.
I guess my myth has always been that Bing's honey is more pure than, packaged sugar.
Yeah, your body doesn't know much difference between white sugar and honey. Sugar is sugar to your body. But there are some reasons to have honey, other than just the flavor. But there are some nutrients in honey that aren't in sugar. You have to have a lot of honey to get a big dose of those nutrients, but yeah, it is maybe purer and has some nutrients in it. So, but just looking at just the sugar, yeah.
Would maple syrup, 100% maple syrup be the least, maybe the better choice of all three, honey?
It's still sugar, and it has
Still
some,
breaks down the
yeah,
same way you
yeah.
want it?
but there are some micronutrients that, if you wanna look at it that way, but once again, if you're using a tablespoon versus a tablespoon of white sugar, you're not gonna get that many nutrients from it. So, but there are other reasons, and people have their reasons for using that, and that's just fine. But to the body, it's the
Does
same
make a
thing,
difference.
right?
And that includes stevia?
Stevia's in a different ballpark, and we'll talk about that one later, okay?
All right, for another display.
Yeah. So added sugars. Added sugars are a subset of the total sugars on the label. So you will see them down below. First, it's the total carbohydrates, then the dietary fiber, then the total sugars, and then it includes 10 grams of added sugar. Okay, I'm going to move it along here because I want to show you these examples. So dietary fiber, what Why is dietary fiber so important to us? Once again, it helps with our digestive health. It's also good to help us control our blood glucose. It helps with lowering our cholesterol. So it's really good for us. And the new food guide label wants to make sure that we see that. So we want to have the total dietary fiber, and it's the naturally occurring fibers and fibers that are added to foods. So the label, it covers both of those. That naturally occurring fiber. So what's a naturally occurring fiber?
Fruits.
Some whole fruits or whole vegetables, grains, whole grains. So those have the naturally occurring fiber, and then some manufacturers do add a bit of fiber to increase that, and they add a natural fiber, okay? So the FDA plans to publish a review of research for 25 different fibers, so we have some things to come. Now let's look at sodium. Americans consume almost 50% more sodium than experts recommend. The current intake for most of us is 3,400 milligrams per day. The recommendation is to reduce it to 2,300 milligrams per day. So that's why it's important for it to be on the food labeling. Where do you think most of the sodium in our diet comes from? Processed foods, packaged foods. It's not from fruits and vegetables and whole grains in and of themselves. We either add sodium to those things or we get it from these processed foods. So it's really important that we be able to look at the sodium content of our foods by looking at the labels so that we can make healthy choices. And then you have to keep in mind, how much you've had during the day. But what's the FDA doing about this? Well, there is going to be draft voluntary guidance on sodium to help us, the American public, gradually reduce sodium intake. In the short term, in the next 2 years, the goal is to help us decrease our sodium intake to 3,000 milligrams a day, and then long term, over the next 10 years, to 2,300. And so this applies to manufacturers of food, it applies to restaurants, to food service operations like here in the hospital. And they're doing a lot of commenting. It's all of this legal stuff. You can comment on this and put in your 2 cents worth. And that was going on up until October, but a lot of 2016, but a lot of this has been delayed. So a lot of it, we were supposed to have the whole new food label on everything by now, but now it's by 2020. So it's just been delayed. And that's why we're seeing the different packaging in the stores right now, because everybody's in the process. There are rules about when manufacturers have to do what. So it's not voluntary, it's mandatory. We talked a little bit about fats already, and manufacturers have 3 years to remove partially hydrogenated oils from foods. I think that's the takeaway from here. So the FDA is asking manufacturers to do other things other than just label their food.
You know what, I read, it's 20 years ago, this is a long time ago, that to determine how much fats, you should have more than 3 to 4 grams of fat per 100 calories. Is that passe, or is that?
Well, that's part of recommendations, and so it's just, a lot of times when you read those recommendations of how many grams of fat for how many calories, it's hard to put into practice because you don't know, you have to do a lot of calculating and figuring out. And so that's part of the reason for these guidelines on the labels. It's making it easier for consumers to actually do what they need to do. On the new labels, we now have vitamin D, calcium, iron, and potassium. Those are the nutrients, or some of the nutrients that there's a daily value for. And that's because these are really nutrients because we have discovered that those are more important for us to know about than our A and C, which used to be on the labels. So you'll see those on the new labels instead of the A and C. I think I'm going to, you can read the rest of these. Go to here. So when you see a label, down at the bottom, it will say something about the daily value. And it's based on a diet of 2,000 calories. Well, that means that based on a 2,000 calorie diet, if you eat that serving size, you will be getting however many percent of what you need to meet the nutrient level of that 2,000 calories. So if you're on a diet that's more than 2,000 calories, that percentage is going to change because it'll be looking at 2,400 calories, and so it's going to change. So this is pretty small. Let's go to the next page. So if you look at these labels, if you look down at the bottom, if you eat 2/3 of a cup of whatever this new label is for, we don't know what that is, but you're going to eat 2/3 of a cup of it, okay? And vitamin D, if you are following a 2,000 calorie diet, you're going to get 2 micrograms of vitamin D from this 2/3 of a cup, and that's 10% of the vitamin D that you need for that day. Okay? If you need 2,000 calories. If you need 2,500 calories and you eat 2/3 of a cup, it's not going to be 10%. It's going to be more like 7.5%. So do you see how that works? It's a little bit confusing, and it's always been a little bit confusing. But what it means is this food provides this percentage of the nutrient that it's talking about if you only need 2,000 calories. If you need only 1,800 by eating 2/3 of a cup of this, you're going to get a little bit more than 10%. So that's how it works. It's just a basic percentage. Okay, so let's review. Remember that in the new label, the serving size is larger and bolder type. The serving sizes are updated. Instead of saying a half a cup, it's going to say more realistic, you're going to eat 2/3 of a cup or a cup. So they've updated those servings, and it's going to be a bottle, not a half a bottle, okay? The calories are larger, so you can see the calories a lot easier. You can see those calories from back there when I hold up the bottle, so they're really bold. We talk about added sugars now, which we didn't do before. We updated the daily values, so we have a new statement about the daily values. It makes it a little bit more easy to understand. We changed the nutrients required, so instead of A and C, we're now talking about dietary fiber and vitamin D, calcium, iron, and potassium. The actual amounts are declared, so before it was just the percentage that they showed, but now they tell us how many micrograms and milligrams and that stuff. So it tells really the exact amount. And then there's that new footnote telling you about being based on 2,000 calories. So, compliance dates. This was done before the end of July last year, but they're not. Manufacturers have 2 years to comply, must use new label by July 26th of 2018. And then those with less than $10 million in annual food sales have an additional year. But we can tell that that's not being enforced because those Cheerios, I think General Mills has way more than that sales in a year, and so they're obviously not compliant yet, so we know that they're getting a little bit of extra time too. You have some little handouts, and these are just some colorful things for you to take home and read if you like. Just a little bit of information that I thought would be helpful for you to have at home. But what I want to do now is look at these foods, because I think this is so interesting. We already talked about the Cheerios, so we can put the Cheerios aside. So, let's talk about these Oreos. These Oreos are sporting the brand new label, aren't they? So, that's good. How many is the serving size?
2.
2 cookies. 2 cookies? 3?
2.
What's a realistic serving size?
5.
Till you pop.
Yeah. So I think that this is one of the ones that I think is really interesting because it is 3 cookies. And I was surprised because we have little packages of Oreos in our vending machines, and there's 4 cookies in there. So I automatically thought it would be 4, based on that. So see how we do things as consumers? We just decide, oh, it should be this because of that. So there are 160 calories in 3 cookies. So if you're lucky enough to be able to eat just 2, you won't have that many calories. Yes.
Something else they're doing though is the sizes are much smaller than they used to be.
You're absolutely
Much
right.
smaller.
Yeah.
I just bought some graham crackers and I couldn't believe how thin they were.
Yeah. Yeah. And that happens
So-
with everything. You know, that has really happened when you think about especially like candy bars and cookies and things like that. If you think about the size of them, they're decreased in size. Yeah.
Plus then you have to take into account the milk that goes with it.
You're right, Sandy. You do have to take into account the milk and you know, is it gonna be skim milk or 2% or whole? Yeah, I vote for whole. It does say milk's favorite cookie. How about that? So we talked about the soup, and I bought this just to demonstrate that it's the same brand, same company. One of them has the old label and one of them has the new label. Okay, so that just shows that we're in the process, that this is happening right now. We can be excited about this, can't we? Well, if you're a food geek like me, you can be excited, but maybe you're not. Okay, these vegetables, these both have the new label. I was really excited to see that. And they both have that added sugar, and neither one have any added sugars. So I thought that was interesting that we think about, sometimes, especially corn, we sometimes think, well, how did they get that corn to taste so sweet in that can? And we think that there might be added sugar, but indeed there's not. So I just thought that these were kind of interesting. And this one it says right on the front, 50% less sodium in these because they're low sodium. So, just vegetables. Okay, the refried beans, this was interesting to me because these are the traditional, these are the fat-free, and both of them have the new label. No added sugar in them. But when you look at the fat profile, the non-fat, it says no fat. So it has to have no fat, and indeed there's no fat on the label. And they're half a cup servings for both of them. And the total fat for the traditional is only 2.5 grams, and of that, 1 gram is saturated and no trans fats. So I was really interested to see that even though they're traditional and they have fat, it's not much. And when you think about beans, why are they so good for us?
Fiber.
The fiber. And so sometimes we think, oh, I don't want to eat those fat-free beans because they don't taste as good as the regular ones. So eat the regular ones, because sometimes it's better to eat it than to not eat it because you don't like the way it tastes. So we have to put, and that's the reason for the label. That's the reason for the label, so you can make those decisions and those choices. We talked about the Coke, so we won't get into that again. Okay, so I always giggle about tuna, and some of you in here will get this, but so I got this one. It says 1 serving is 1 pouch, and that's 2.5 ounces in there. Has the new label on it, so it says no added sugar. 16 grams of protein. Cute little package, isn't it? You don't have to drain it or anything, and you could eat it right out of here if you like tuna, which I don't. But this can says that it has about 2 servings in this can. It has the old nutrition fact label, so it's really hard to read. So let's talk about it. Who can eat this whole can? Who would eat the whole can? Yeah. So for most of us, this isn't really 2 servings. So really, who could eat 2 of these? Or more than this? Chinook could. So I'll tell you about my son. My son can eat 3 of these made into tuna salad. So that's another reason. Some of us eat more than others. And so if you're gonna have 3 of these, you have to take into account what that really is. You have to pay attention to how much you're eating. Okay, these don't have calories, or one of them has like 5 calories, and this is sugar-free stuff, and I only bought it so that I could show you that one has the new label, one has the old label. They're both either sugar-free or low-calorie. So the new label, this one says serving size 1 bottle. This one says serving size about, it's 8 ounces, and there's about 2.2 servings in here. What do you think? Who's gonna drink the whole bottle? Yeah. That's why you bought it, because you're thirsty and you wanna drink the whole bottle, right? You're not gonna pour out 8 ounces into a glass. Well, maybe Jewel is, because she told me that a while ago. It lasts her, and that's good. Okay, the almonds. Once again, just an example of old label, new label. The same company, and we know that they, make lots of nuts and they sell a lot, but they're right in the middle of having the new label or the old label on them. Really, this is just 1 package as a serving, and that's what you've got in front of you. Okay? Do you all see all these cute little things? This one's called a strawberry flavored soy and dairy protein shake with other natural flavors, and it's got 25 grams of protein. And it has the old label on it. They both actually have the old label on it. But this one declared that serving size is the whole bottle, and even with the old label on it. And this one says that the serving size is 8 ounces, and there's about 2 in there.
Is
But
it a
what's-
different company? I can't see.
They're different companies. Yep. But see, really, when you buy a protein shake like this, you expect to drink the whole thing. So this is more what we really do, isn't it? And so that's why the new label makes more sense.
How many calories in one of those?
320 and 130. So they vary a lot. I shop at Safeway. So if you go to Safeway, that end cap back there at the back of produce, there's a lot of juices and stuff like that in there. Sometimes stop there and just take a look at them. They vary a lot. Well, wait a minute, Margaret, no. I stand corrected. This is 2 servings. So this is 100, this is 260. And this is 320. Still a difference. But yeah, look at those things back there. It's really interesting. They all look good too. But I don't buy them because they're expensive. Okay, the prunes and the apricots. talked about the phytochemicals and all that stuff last month. And then the last thing is, this is a mix for rice, and it's brown rice, and it has the old label on it. And this has quite a bit of sodium and different additives to it. And this one has the new label, and it's just plain brown rice. So maybe not as flavorful, but you can jazz this one up. The last thing I wanted to mention before we go is, I got that too, but we'll talk about that later. So when the other part of the label that you see, let me see if I can find a big one. It's down here at the bottom. Down here at the bottom are the ingredients. So how do you think the ingredients go? So when you look at this,
In order of quantity?
in order of quantity, yeah. So the first thing is what it consists of mostly. So this one is soy milk. That's what it is mostly. And then its last little ingredient is milk protein. So when you're reading a label like this is how you can tell what's in it. You want to look for the things like salt and sugar and things like that way down at the bottom, not up at the first thing. So if I look at the Coke, let's see, what is the first?
Shit, corn syrup.
First one is actually carbonated water, and then high fructose corn syrup. So carbonated water is the first, and then followed closely behind is the corn syrup. Okay, I was just gonna show you the peanut butter because this tells us that 2 tablespoons is a serving size, and I was gonna measure it out, but I didn't. And this has a new label. That's why.